You've found AHO Radio, where authentic human outliers coming together to help heal the fear of being authentic, to bring back genuine human conversation. No hype, no sensationalism, just honest talk about the critical issues affecting society, affecting humankind. And now, here are the hosts of AHO Radio, John Krotec and Bill Protzmann. And a very good day to wherever you are in the world on this June 29th of 2021. So happy to be here this morning. And believe me, it was an ordeal getting to this place, but we are really glad to be here. Bill Protzmann, Music Care Incorporated, one of our sponsors. I want to introduce John real quick, my co-host, who, by the way, is also part of our sponsorship team with Green Zone Hero and Hashtag Planet and Task Force Zen. John, good morning, man. How are you?
Hey, Bill, always good to see you. You know, I'm in the Shenandoah Valley now, switched from Florida, but it's beautiful here. Very blessed and super, super excited with today's guest on today. So it's going to be great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've been reading Jim's stuff, unbeknownst to him. I've been reading his stuff for a while. And one of the publications that I read regularly is a newsletter from the Advocates. And I've been reading that thing, man, since I think the late 80s. And it's a libertarian newsletter and basically takes on everything that is sort of weird about our political environment these days in the context of do no harm and human respect. And we're here today to talk to the gentleman who's like behind a lot of that, executive editor of the Advocates, president of Downsize DC, author of co-author of the Political Conscience Test, and part of the Zero Aggression Project. Jim, there's so much on your resume, but we're here to talk to you about, you know, who you are and how you got that way. And just welcome to AHO Radio, man. It's a pleasure you're here.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you bet. Thanks for taking some time away from all of that to help animate our audience. You know, this is a crazy question, but let's start with basics. So one of the things that people don't really get is libertarianism. You say that word and people's minds go in strange places, but we know that that's not it. So could you start out by just sort of explaining how you came to have the sort of conscience that you do?
A lot of it came from my dad. I was raised in a household where there was a lot of discussion about politics and the world and history. I had an outside frame of reference pretty early and realized that I had an aptitude for history and social studies as well. I had a teacher in 7th grade who did something that maybe is politically incorrect today, but it made a big difference in my life. He would hand out the tests after they'd been taken, and he would always announce who got the highest score. And I was a very average student, but in history, it came very easy to me. Social studies came very easy to me. And I was always the student with the top score. And so, you know, having that recognition come to me started to awaken something in me that this was a talent that I had, and I got attracted to the field. I'd like to joke that if I was better at math, I would have been an engineer. Instead, I chose a life of crime, and because I think a lot of politics is criminal, and so that was kind of the start of the whole thing. But it really came to be that in 1996, I was a conservative Republican, very disappointed about Dole as the selection of the party. They're heading, just about 2 years before or a year and a half before. And I began to realize that they didn't really mean it. And that put me in a bit of an existential crisis. And I had told several friends that there was no way I could vote for Bob Dole. And at the time, they all expressed the same degree of horror. They said, well, you're going to elect Bill Clinton president. And I said, well, thank you. I wish I had that much power. But I still can't do it. And a couple of weeks later, I discovered the Libertarian Party on C-SPAN. They were holding a national convention. Harry Brown was the candidate at the time.
Yeah.
Just a very eloquent spokesperson, and has particular attracted me to this message. And within a couple of months, I was well on my libertarian journey.
And for folks who don't really understand what the message of libertarianism is, what's the easiest way of saying that? I know my own way, but what's yours?
I would say that you should not initiate force against other people. Now, what that means is in life, in nature, you don't aggress against other people, you don't coerce them, you don't throw the first punch, so to speak. You let people live their lives. And you do that consistently, you would also do that in politics, because what politics essentially is we hire agents. We hire our neighbors and friends to kick down the doors for us, to harass and arrest people for us, to fine them if they don't do exactly what we want. The libertarian believes that every individual is to some degree sacrosanct. They matter as a human being. Whether you come at that from more of a theistic view like I do, I believe that God made us all unique and special, or you have some other means of arriving at that, because lots of people do. You just basically believe we should practice respect for one another. And every time we fail to practice this respect, this human respect, we find that it diminishes happiness, and it also diminishes harmony, right? We see the social conflict around us right now, and we see a reduction in prosperity, because what we're doing essentially is stealing people's happiness. We're stealing their ability to pursue their happiness, and sometimes we're outright, in fact, with taxes, we are outright taking their wealth away from them.
That's a great beginning and a great follow-up to that question. It sounds like we had similar fathers, and my dad was also very interested in history and very interested in social sciences and very interested in politics. And he instilled in me, like you, Jim, a great love of country and a great love of history, because there's no reference if we don't have history. We're watching what's happening right now. What I like about what you've said about libertarianism is there's this caring, there's this etiquette, there's this complete lack of respect. We see it every day. There's division being cultivated by the very people in power that supposedly we voted for. Oh, and by the way, a real close personal lady friend of mine said that Bill Clinton ruined it for women everywhere, that he completely pulled out the rug of etiquette and respect for women. So thank you for not voting for him. I didn't vote for him either. And I just, let me ask you this, with so much division and the message and the stuff that you're doing, how can people tap back into critical thinking, and how can they tap back into their own intuition? Where can they go, Jim, and find outlets that are not co-opted by the very same people that create the division? Are there places people can go?
That's a great question. The reason that you guys came in contact with me, because I was working on a experimental initiative called the Exit Network, and we were going to deal directly with the media. We just published our last article, what is likely our last article, just a couple hours ago. So people can go to Substack. That's where we're at right now. If you go to substack.com, it's the Exit Network. And we were beginning to deal with the media issues. I don't know what the future of the Exit Network is going to be right now. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with our main patron, and he wanted to see something different. So we're looking into that right now. And there may be somebody else who will pick that up, and we'll see what happens. I do think you have to do, it's up to you as an individual to try to find those sources. And I do know that they're out there. So a quick story, in 2002, we were aware that the United States government wanted to go to war with Iraq desperately. It was the Bush administration's goal. And we were also aware that there were some things that have been, that basically nations lie. When governments find out, when politicians find out that there's an opportunity for war, they will lie to get us into it. And not just them, but the media will come along for the ride. Now, they might criticize it in the years that follow, but war is really good for business for both of those industries. And so we knew this, and so that caused us to go on an intellectual hunt. We began trying to do the research that was necessary to find out was the truth being told. And because we had that initial instinct, it turned out, even all the way back in 2002 and the beginning of 2003, that information was out there. In about 6-8 weeks, we popped up a website called TruthAboutWar that we've archived, truthaboutwar.org. It's been archived in time so people go back and look at it. And we told the history. We exposed the lies that were told back in the first Gulf War and that were being told at the time. And one of those that we said, and this was taking a real big risk at the time, was that there were no nuclear weapons of mass destruction. And this was despite the fact that Colin Powell had gone on national television, appearing before the United Nations Security Council, and showed people video that had been taken, dramatic video that had been taken from satellites and so forth, and other bits of intelligence. And we said, no, that wasn't happening. We ran radio ads in multiple cities. And to give you an idea of how outside the box this was at the time, because it's easy to forget, we ran a set of radio ads. We would go from market to market. Our budget only permitted us to buy 1 week at a time. And we did that, and we got kicked out of almost every market we were in, including the San Francisco radio market, which you would have expected to be more anti-war.
Right, yeah.
But radio stations would get so much complaints about our ads that they wanted us out. And we didn't stop that war. And I've left that up in time as kind of a monument to the fact that if you do your homework, it is out there. And I have this initial suspicion and I know this might sound really strange, that politicians sometimes lie.
Well, I read that interview with Dan Ellsberg recently, where he went back and sort of talked about the Pentagon Papers, and then also talked about the more current stuff that he's dropped. And it's a huge risk for people to take that position and appear to the world as if they're traitors to expose the lies of the government, in that case, Vietnam, which had gone on for, 4 administrations by the time he exposed it. And that's an enormous risk. Obviously, there was great media attention because of where that story dropped. And I'm curious today how we get that kind of media attention for, and I hate to use the word, but I'm going to use it, how we get that kind of media attention for the truth. I mean, do we have a way forward?
I think I really think it's really up to every individual that's watching and listening right now. It's up to you.
Do your research.
You got to do your homework, because one of the things that we just did with the Exit Network, we only did this once because it was very, very difficult. I'm not a professional journalist. That's not what I do. But we had two of us working on an article about hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for COVID-19.
Yeah.
And this is a situation where the media has engaged in an extreme amount of suppression. We went in looking to falsify the claim that hydroxychloroquine worked, because there are doctors, and we're literally talking tens of thousands of them. There's probably like 30,000 of these doctors around the planet right now that have been using a specific regimen, and they are claiming spectacular success. And without getting into the details of it, I will just say to you, what we discovered was that the studies that are being used by established media sources and the people who are appearing on shows like CNN, they are referencing studies that were incredibly, badly, horribly, I would even go so far in a couple of cases to say criminally flawed. And we went through and started reading the studies. And the thing that bothered me, Bill and John, about this was, at the end of this exercise, I realized that I was looking at one little teeny tiny slice of just one issue, which was COVID-19, a big issue, mind you. But there are hundreds of issues. And I'm only looking at one sliver. I'm looking at one tiny slice of just one issue. We spent, between the two of us, over 90 hours working on this project, putting this report together. Had to stop. You just had to draw a line at some point, because it's like even this was a bottomless hole. And I started to feel at the end of it a little bit of a sense of desperation that there isn't, that nobody could possibly spend all this time. You've got to live your life. You've got a job. You've got a family. Right, yeah. You've got other things that you're doing. Maybe you're giving to your community. You got to sleep at some point. You can't possibly do all of these, research all of these things. But what I will say is that in backwaters, in various places, there are people. It's interesting. The word amateur has the same root word as amor, love, amore.
Love. Yes.
Yes. So it's the love of knowledge. And there are amateurs out there who are not seeking grants from any government agency like Anthony Fauci. They're not, they are out there doing things because they understand them well, they believe them, they have a love for these things. And if you can find those people, and those specialists are out there. And I would seek them out at every opportunity we could. That's the way that we've got this tool. And if we can stay off the major platforms like Facebook, where we can converse with each other on blogs and different stuff, we still at this hour have the ability to communicate with each other. But it definitely, there is Bill, it's really, really a difficult situation right now, because we have YouTube and Facebook and Twitter actively working with the media, by the way, that wants them dead, like MSNBC and CNN and the New York Times and so forth. They see that Facebook and Twitter as competitors, and yet Facebook and Twitter is basically trying to make sure they satisfy their betters. I don't know. It's just weird to me how they should be in direct competition and not tolerating this basically high-tech book burning that's going on right now.
Yes.
But we're going to have to seek it. At the end of the day, I think it really just comes down on our shoulders. We have to seek it out.
And here's the greatest challenge to that. Some great points, by the way, Jim. With so much, you say politicians lie, it's not a revelation to us, right? These lovely amateurs, but with so and
John, it's not a revelation. It's not a revelation to anybody. I mean, this is the Tonight Show humor. 40 years ago was about politicians and their foibles. So I mean, everybody knows how bad they are. It's just can't we add that all up and figure it out in gross terms?
Exactly, well put. And so with the weight of the lies and the weight of the deception, okay, the average Joe or Jane on the street that has those livelihoods to survive and they don't become desperate, it creates this hopelessness. And as well as I do, we believe in human connection. I talk to dozens of people a week, and there's like an underlying hopelessness, almost a lack of hope, and it almost feels at times to the people I talk to, they feel like we're losing the battle. Is there anything that you can say to turn that tide? Are we losing the battle, or are we winning the battle of lies and deception?
So the answer is always yes and no to a question like that. I could point to you several things that are getting better and going better. The most obvious of these things is technology. Notwithstanding the issues we had before we came on air this morning, technology is on balance making our lives better. And we have things that our parents and grandparents could not have imagined. And, just for example, for me, the ability to work from home, I was working from home long before COVID started. In fact, as far back as 2003, I've been working, most of my days are spent in my home office. And so the ability to be able to do that, just dramatic, that's a life-changing thing. It was a great thing for our family. But there are things that are actually going worse too. There is no doubt about that. And, I'm always reminded of the song by Billy Joel, "We Didn't Start the Fire," right? There's always these things that are going on. Specifically to the issues that people are feeling worse about though, one reason that they are feeling worse about these ideas is that the media is telling them to do that. And so there's a theory, you can look this up, Wikipedia's article is great about this, if that's where you want to start, called agenda setting theory. And essentially the way it works is because something gets talked about a lot on your television set, in your newspaper, and on your radio, or maybe now in your news feed, everyone begins to talk about that same thing. So they begin to care about that stuff. Richard Viguerie, who's a direct mail writer, used to say, if Dan Rather isn't talking about it, I can't raise money over it, right? There's always been this human instinct to talk about whatever it is that the whole village is discussing at that moment. And in our national village, that's going to be conflict. The way that the media itself is structured, let's take an outfit like CNN. They're my favorite one to pick on because they had this, everybody knew that the MSNBC was the Democrats and everybody knows that Fox News, the Republicans, right? So where does CNN fit in? They're the CIA news network for whatever it's worth. But what they'll do is they'll put up a set of Republicans and Democrats on a panel, and they'll make everything about their fight, the fight between them, especially if there's a political campaign season going on. So, in 2012, it's Romney and Obama. In 2016, it's Clinton and Trump. And everything is about how is it going to affect the candidate, their campaign? What are they going to do? How are they going to spin this? What are they going to say, right? And it's hardball that we're playing right now, as Chris Matthews used to call it. And so if you notice what's going on there, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about our neighbors or our communities, right? It's about the effect on these people who live in a far distant land who are competing for power. And the whole thing ends up becoming a contest. So here's the two concepts together. Agenda setting theory says that we're all going to talk about what's on the television set, and the conflict machine, which is basically our political model, is all about who's up, who's down, who's winning, who's losing, who's going to get the levers of power, and what are they going to do bad to the rest of us when they get them. And it's a fear-based model. So the agenda that's being set for us is fear. The number one thing you can do is turn it off. If you go on a fast from all news sources, especially the cable news ones, they are especially vicious. If you go on a fast, you come back and you watch it again, you'll be appalled. It'll be like, wait a minute, this is what I was putting into my body. This is what I was putting into my mind. It is shocking. But for most people who are watching that stuff right now, it is basically, and I'm sorry, they're not going to want to hear me say this, it is an addiction. They're getting constantly stimulated by this negative information, by the fight. They go out and they parrot the talking points that they're supposed to for their tribe, because we are essentially tribal creatures, and they don't realize how easily and how often they're being manipulated. Quick story. I go on a radio show in the fall of 2018. I'm doing an interview, and at the time, the hot issue was that there was this caravan coming up through Central America that was going to make it to the US border. And this was a big thing. Now, this caravan conveniently was not going to arrive until right before Thanksgiving. The election was at the beginning of November. You with me? This is October timeframe.
Yeah. Yep.
And we were being told this is something really to be scared of. Well, it turned out, and I said this out loud, I said, this is the Trump campaign at work. I doubt this caravan even exists. None of you who are listening to the sound of my voice right now have seen it for yourselves. You don't actually know that it exists. All you have is video images. Come on, I'd seen the movie Wag the Dog. Okay, so
Right.
when this caravan, I said, when the election's over, you won't hear anything more about this. This story will be dead. This caravan will never hit the border. None of the stuff that you are getting all mad about right now is going to happen. And here's the worst thing. You're going to be on to completely something else. You're not even going to ask where that story went. You're going to completely forget about it. We had a guy call up the radio show. They had to cut him off. He was screaming mad at me. I could feel the spit 3 states away, and that's how mad he was. But you know what happened? You guys both know the story went away, and he forgot about it. So did everybody else.
Yeah. There's a built-in invitation here to ask you the question about respect and dignity. And John and I are huge believers in the missing power of etiquette in our world today. What can we offer people? Or better yet, how can we persuade people that dignity and etiquette aren't dead and that there's actually life in being kind to one another?
Well, the best way is to suggest that it works. The idea behind human respect and the idea that we were promoting at the Exit Network is that it's a philosophy that's grounded in a natural reality. So, you know that if you walk off the top of a tall building with no plan for how you're going to get to the bottom, nature will take care of it for you.
Yep.
You will get there pretty quick. And it's not the fall so much as the landing that's really the problem. And we know this, and so consequently, we don't walk off tall buildings generally. And so there's the same thing's true in the nature of respect. Human respect is an idea that anytime I use coercive force against you, anytime I threaten you with violence or actually apply it to get what it is that I want, that it is going to damage our relationship. And I know this. So, even criminals, even stone cold criminals, do not spend the majority of their time engaged in initiating force against people. They're not stealing most of the time. Most of their lives, they're living with other to have relationship. But it turns out that we can't break these principles. There's no secret magic. There's no elixir. Politicians don't walk around with wands in their hands. They're not wizards. They can't suddenly break that law on our behalf and then expect the result to somehow or other not degrade happiness, not reduce prosperity, not diminish harmony. And so those happiness, harmony, and prosperity come with the respect we pay one another to allow each of you and myself and everyone who's listening to pursue happiness as they see fit, so long as they're not hurting anyone else. So in simplification, it works. Respect works.
It seems to me, when I'll go back to people that we talk to, it seems to me that people everywhere are crying out for leadership. Not only at home, we see the breakup of the nuclear family, but in our communities with leadership at these school board meetings. And then we see it at the state level and now at the federal level, not only in the government, but also in our large corporations, the multinationals. We see this general lack of leadership. And that's another word that keeps popping up, Jim, again and again. Where do we find those leaders? Do we have to search them out again?
So in this particular case, I think this is one of those places where I can point and say that the state has been the most destructive entity in all of this. You can hide behind bad leadership with lots of bureaucracy. You can hide behind failed leadership when you can say, well, I'm just following orders. You can hide behind bad leadership when all the decisions are being made by some outside force, and you say, well, my hands are tied, I can't, this is how we have to do things. We have a series of things that have been structured in an unnatural way. They're not the normal way that humans interact with each other. They're artificial structures that have been put in place, whether it's mega corporations or it's large bureaucracies in your state and national capitals that work. They create incentives that are perverse, that are not normal, that allow people to get off the hook. And I think at the end of the day, what you want is a responsibility society. This comes once again from allowing people to pursue their happiness as they see fit, as opposed to trying to force them into various artificial structures. And I think, by the way, this issue starts very young. I'm personally a huge advocate of homeschooling. We homeschooled all of our kids up through the 10th grade. I don't believe we harmed them in any way by doing that. I think the results have been incredibly positive that we did that. As a result, we know a lot of other homeschooling families who have done the same thing. I recognize that this is not necessarily the best situation for everyone. My wife presently works at a private school, in a part-time job there, so there are other options that people could or should choose, and a market would make that available. But I would say that any system, no matter what system you're going to choose for your children, it should be one that teaches them, gives them the basics that they need to thrive in life, and then helps them, even in the process of learning, to actualize themselves. And if they begin to learn in a way that frees them, if they can pursue things to their desire and their natural intent, maybe they're not as interested today in history and social studies as I am kind of all the time, right? But maybe they're a little more interested in science today, right? Letting them go and pursue themselves and begin to design themselves as human beings, which they will naturally do. The Montessori school approach does this as well, as I understand it. Letting them actualize themselves prepares them for being able to do it in life. Yeah. And so I think in every structure we should be looking at, whether it's business, whether it's our, we have a lack of community. There used to be mutual aid societies 120 years ago. They've basically gone by the wayside because, well, there's a government program for that. So if we want to see a return of responsibility, we need to actually give people responsibility again, as opposed to offloading it to politicians who say, I feel your pain.
I don't want to lay blame for anything, but like you, I've felt that this rush to the majority, government schools are good, everybody goes to government schools, right? Or, everybody votes this way, so you should vote this way, has been so destructive to our individual respect. Like having to give up your vote because it's the right thing to do to not elect the other guy. That doesn't fly for me. I don't do anything else in life like that. I don't drink orange juice because I have something against milk, right? That's not the thought process. Right. And I've spent a lot of time volunteering in homelessness and in veteran services around here in San Diego. And it amazes me how the government is so invested in doing something that doesn't work. It's like any reasonable person would say, no, that's not offering respect and dignity to anybody who's living on the street. Why are we still doing that? But in 12 years, we're still doing that. And we rearrange the deck chairs, but it's the same program. And nobody has jumped up with a persuasive argument about homelessness or about healthcare, about all the other things that we're just sort of offloading to the government, to the liars and thieves who basically run things on our behalf. And becoming collective ostriches with our head in the sand, and it's complicated. It's
very
easy.
Complicated.
It's easier to let it go to somebody else who doesn't read the bill that they vote for, than to take a stand and try to be somebody. So there's a huge personal cost involved with those of us who are on that edge right now and saying, no, wait. And you've experienced that. So how do you stay in the game, Jim, with this? What is basically a contrarian point of view, but one that is heartfelt, one that comes from love. That's a hard place to be, man. How do you do it?
Well, I think we're winning in the long run. I think the arc of history is bent in an empathetic direction. Humans have reduced slavery. We haven't eradicated it yet. We got a long way to go, but we've made a tremendous amount of progress if you look at things in the long term. Short term, we might have some concerns, and we all live in the short term, right? So the short term isn't, significant. I mean, imagine being in Weimar, Germany, pre-Hitler. You know,
Right,
there's
right.
you were going to see that happens here. I mean, I don't understand how that's all going to go, but I stay in the game because I think we're winning. And I think that when people actually have an opportunity to hear these ideas, they want them. They might feel trapped. They might feel that they can't have them, but they clearly want them. So it's not like we're selling a product that nobody wants. We're selling a product that they're scared that if they invest in or they take the time in, that the market timing is bad. They're not going to get what they want right now. They're going to get something even worse than the thing that they're voting for.
Yeah.
It is the lesser of two evils. And you know, on your point specifically, just to show how bad the situation is on the ground today in homelessness, if you attempt to go set up your own soup kitchen, you got to get the right permits. You got to pull the right. You got to do all these different things just to get to the start line. If you know, we have stories, and there's been more that this has been told, and just in the last few years, of people making sandwiches and going and setting up on a table on the curb and giving it out to the homeless, and government agents showing up and pouring bleach on the sandwiches because the proper permits weren't pulled and the things weren't done. We have a situation right here near my own hometown, right just north of me in Cleveland, where a church wanted to also simultaneously be a homeless shelter. Well, you're not zoned to be a homeless shelter, right? And the NIMBYs take over, not in my backyard, right? And so they can't actually provide the service unless they're willing to commit to, instead of being a church, be a homeless shelter, and they got to put in certain fire stuff, and they got to do this, they got to do that. And so, you know, the real people are lost in all of this, but, you know, they don't forget about the job of the inspector, because that's how this all works. That's where the money comes from.
Right.
It really is a pretty serious thing. But if we could allow this creativity, this human creativity, to escape a little bit, if it didn't have to overcome quite as many hurdles, I think we would see an explosion of human kindness, an explosion of empathy and respect.
You know, it's interesting. You know, you've outlined, and we all can agree that it is multifaceted, multi-layered, very complicated and complex. But some of the things that you said today, Jim, are actually quite simple, like personal responsibility, asking questions, not, you know, doing your homework. These things, sure, they take a little bit of time, but they're not hard to do. Start a media fast. Wow, what an incredible idea. You know, do a fear diet for a week. But these are incredibly simple things. And that there's no doubt in my mind, there's no doubt that if we take personal responsibility and do these things, it will blossom out, it will branch out. We can put the kind back into mankind. And it has to start with leadership. And it has to talk with conversations like this to maybe provoke, but in a positive way, real action. You've outlined some really deep subjects today, but the solutions are somewhat simple on the individual level.
I think it all starts with individuals.
The individual movement
Thank you.
is in the middle right now. It's like there's a whole chunk of America that wants somebody to jump up and lead with love. And I'm curious, if you looked into your crystal ball, who would you see in that space right now? I mean, who's capable of grabbing that audience with persuasion and compassion and respect and helping them understand this more deeply?
I'm still waiting for that person right now. I'll be honest with you. You know, there's been some people in my life that I've seen step up and try to do some things, but didn't quite get the national attention that they deserved or should have gotten. And I go back all the way to the beginning of our conversation. One of those people was clearly Harry Brown.
Yeah, Harry Brown.
Just so, you know, if you can go back on your YouTube and find some old video of him, this was a guy that looked like he walked out of central casting for the part of president. And he was just so prepared. When he showed up for an interview like this, he spoke and rehearsed sound bites because he knew he only had one chance to make a first impression. He wanted it to be perfect. But it wasn't just those two things. The thing that really was good about this man was that he had a core to him. You knew he was sincere. And I think even though Ron Paul would be another person I would have pointed to, who not eloquent like Harry, didn't put sentences together very well, but people knew that he was genuine. They knew that he was real, that he really believed in the things that he was saying. Yeah. And that's the very first thing I would look for in a spokesperson at this hour. Wouldn't be that they're eloquent and silver tongued. It would be that they had a core to them, that everyone who was watching them knew and hearing them knew that they really sincerely, to the core of their being, meant what they said. I'm waiting to see that person who can catch on. I think that a lot of the work that I've done over the years has been geared towards trying to find more people who think the way that I do.
Right.
Because if there was enough of us and we were organized a little bit, we could provide the pulpit and the platform, because a lot of times communications is a money issue. And now with the internet, a viral sharing issue as well. And so having more of us would make a big difference in finding the person. So in my day-to-day work, I'm less interested in finding that person than I am in finding all the little, I'm looking to build a parade that's so big that someone will want to come in front of this and lead it.
Assembling the tribe. It's been said, the majority never had an innovative idea, but I think it's time that we accept the paradox in that, because there is a majority in the United States that wants respect, that wants dignity, that's tired of fear, that's tired of greed. And how to energize those people is really, I think, that's the thing in my heart, is like, what can we do with our little radio show here to allow people like that to go, yes, Jim said some things that really got me at a heart level. And I want to be that,
I've got a quote of my own, 30,000 foot ideas are sometimes hard for people to understand. So I always say, so change your altitude, tweak it just a little bit, message it in a way that people can understand, and then pick up speed and altitude once you have more believers. And I don't know, it's just a crazy quote, but I hear you. I understand the dilemma and the challenge. And this is not a cliche question, Jim, but I know you love history, but I really want to know this. Who is your favorite historical figure of all time? And it's not a cliche question. I really want to know who you admire the most.
Oh, I don't want to sound too George Bushish. I guess it's Jesus Christ. Because I think that one of the things politics, okay, just to bring this to the realm that I live in every day, one of the things that politics exists for, and the reason we have tribes, is that there's this very human desire or need to blame one another. Somebody has to be blamed for every problem that we have. Jesus, interestingly, said after a tower had fallen, people came and said to him, why did that tower fall on those people? What was their sin? And he said, it rains on the just and the unjust alike. In other words, he was saying they weren't being punished for their sins. And my definition of sin is something akin to covetous rivalry or blame, right? This need to say that someone else is responsible for why I am not happy right now, and they must be punished. And the accuser, Satan, shows up to divide that. Now, you don't have to believe in all the spiritual infrastructure that I'm describing right now, but you can see the pattern out in the world. Right. And what ends up happening in this situation is that people eventually, they build up into tribes to fight these various evils. And the tribes begin to behave more and more like one another. They start to really mirror each other in their behaviors. They get uglier and uglier. And eventually the conflict overheats, and a sacrifice has to be made. And Jesus said, enough of that. I'll be the last one. Don't do this anymore. Stop. I want you to love your neighbor as yourself. I want you to love your God with all your heart, soul, strength. That's what I want out of you. That's the whole law. Don't worry about all these rules. That's the point. And so to me, that's the most profound message of all time. It still applies to this very hour. I'm not, doing an altar call here for, the Billy Graham hour or something. I'm suggesting that, although, I'm for that. I'm suggesting that as an individual with heart, we should always want to empathize and understand those around us. But those are the ones where, if we don't do that, we can't possibly have peace. So that would be my answer.
I love that answer. And I'm the biggest organ is your heart, despite what the world wants us to believe. And that, if you lead with heart, Jim, you got it, brother. You're going to change the world. So I'm on the tribal bus, and all I can say is I appreciate you and what you stand for, and the work that you're doing. It's so relevant. It's so timely, and people just need to be responsible, because if we live in the same neighborhood and only one person enjoys it, then everybody else suffers, and we don't want to suffer. We want to live together. We don't want to become desperate and depraved and experience some of the things that we're seeing. It's time for love. It's time for leadership. It's time to take a media fast and stop with all this fear, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Jim, I find your words challenging and encouraging at the same time in a way that is really refreshing.
Thank you.
This thing about authenticity, everybody says, "Oh, I'm authentic," right? Authentic is not a noun; it's an adjective. It describes how you are.
Action word, yeah.
And if you're not doing your genuine capability, you're not doing authenticity. To twist it around, and I am just so honored that you're here doing your authentic calling with us today. That is so rare, and I think with encouragement, we can all step a little bit more into that space. It's dangerous out there, but it's necessary.
And I'm not blowing smoke, but I have a lot more hope now, talking with Jim and realizing that there's some 30,000-foot people out there that are making a difference in the world. And I, like you, Jim, believe we're winning, man.
Yeah. Final words of wisdom, Jim. What would you say if you had a soundbite opportunity? We'll give you the soundbite opportunity here.
That you matter, and that politicians are always on the take. So if you recognize the fact that they have another ulterior motive to their behavior, that every government program that lifts the burden off of your shoulder is something that is not going to be free. It might seem free, but it isn't. But that there's lots of harmful outcomes that come out. And we talked about responsibility being lost here. That every time you, instead of turning to a politician, act yourself, you make the world a better place. You make the world a better place for someone else. You make the world a better place for yourself. We know that one of the best ways to increase individual happiness is through individual acts of service. And so the service that you gentlemen are doing here by providing the show, the service that you've done, Bill, in homelessness, all of these things matter, especially if you can touch and reach people, which bureaucracies have an increasingly difficult time doing, that human touch factor. So you have the ability to make the world a better place. Please don't rely on Sacramento if you're in California, and DC for all the rest of us. Please don't rely on the people that are there to do it. They're not. They can't. They don't have the right tools. The only tool they have in their kit is the ability to point guns at people and say, do this or pay for that. That's it. That's the only thing that makes them special and unique. We can do so much better if we come together and work with each other. And the first step to being able to downsize DC or any of the state governments is that we begin to take those things back in our communities, and we try to find ways to once again connect with other people who share our values and help those who are struggling.
Hear, hear.
That's awesome. Yeah, hear. And that there is greener grass.
There is greener grass. Jim, thank you so much for taking time with us today and for surmounting the technology that always makes it difficult for us to do this, but which also helps us make it work. And, oh my gosh, you guys, what a great opportunity to actually mirror the kind of authenticity we hope for, to offer the safety that we want to offer to people if they're thinking about dipping a toe in the authentic pool, and just to be this voice of reasonableness in the world. John, thank you. Jim, thank you. Audience, thank you. We love you guys. Thank you for joining us on this episode of AHO Radio. Information we mentioned is probably in the show notes, but if we missed anything, please let us know and we'll get it added for you. Subscribe to the AHO Radio channel on YouTube to stay connected, and as always, we wish you health, success, and significance. AHO!
AHO!
AHO!